And joining me now in the studio is the executive coach, Harold Hillman, who has the voice of God, I have to say. You do.
Good morning, Roman. That's daunting, actually.
No, well, for me as well. But you know what? If they were casting for a radio God, you could play God, I reckon.
Sort of like Morgan Freeman?
Yes. Actually, yes. Those silky, rich timbre tones that you have. Now, you've also been very successful in your life with lots of things. You're an author, business commentator. You're the managing director of Sigmoid Curve Consulting Group, which people can tap into with any of business. It doesn't matter how big the business is, right?
That's right.
You can do so much more with the things that you've got, and Harold can help you do that. You've also written some pretty good books too. The Impostor Syndrome was a bestseller.
It was. I wrote The Impostor Syndrome in 2013 based largely on my own experience of having lived life behind a mask for a significant part of my life, not only in terms of what you would call the typical pressures that people put on themselves when they are, high potential and accelerating quickly. So sometimes you end up in roles that are bigger than perhaps you anticipated, and there's a real self-imposed pressure to get it right, and so you disconnect from people. But I also lived, for the first 40 years of my life, I lived as a closeted gay man, and so I put more of a premium on who I thought people needed me to be, as opposed to who I was. So I felt pretty qualified to write a book called The Impostor Syndrome.
Totally.
Because I had lived as an imposter.
Do you think, though, regardless of sexuality, that to some extent we all put that mask on when we go to work?
We most certainly do. I wrote the book, The Impostor Syndrome, to normalize this thing that when you're going through it, you feel like you're the only one. Roughly 75% of what you would call people with high aspiration, high drive, high achievement need, high standards. It tends to travel with people who just are tracking fast, and particularly in terms of their career trajectory. And it is not uncommon for them to not back themselves initially. At some point in our 40s and 50s, we get a little bit more relaxed.
Yeah.
Around the fact that we can't be perfect.
I couldn't give a flying fart, to be fair, and I have got past that age. But what is it we fear the most in a work point of view? What is it we're scared of? Why do we have to hide?
It is, it depends on your relation. I say it depends on your relationship with vulnerability. This thing called vulnerability, which is just ultimately, do you have a good relationship with the fact that as human beings, we are all imperfect. And so there's no such thing as a perfect person.
I thought I was pretty perfect, to be fair.
But some people put a lot of pressure on themselves to be perfect, and they struggle with vulnerability a little bit, a bit more. So it really is, the essence of it is, do you back yourself more than criticize yourself? I talk about two voices that you have in your head at any given time, and one is called the inner coach, and one is called the inner critic. And sometimes with imposter syndrome, the inner critic is louder. So constantly sort of getting at you around things that you aren't doing well, things that you can do better. It's not very fueling, as opposed to the inner coach, which is go for it. You're right for this role. You're still on a learning curve. Be kind to yourself. Be a bit more compassionate to yourself.
No, I'm with you. I'm just thinking, we talk about the tall poppy syndrome in New Zealand a lot.
Yeah.
You've worked in the States.
Yeah.
Is it worse here than it is there?
It is. It is. In the book, The Fitting and Standing Out, I talked about the inherent tension associated with needing to fit in with the team, but also needing to stand out in terms of who you are. And in New Zealand, team takes precedence over individualism, whereas in the States, you get a little bit more latitude to be centric, or you know what I mean. You can see it on the sports field. For example, in a National Football League game where a running back scores a touchdown and he's dancing in the end zone for the crowd, as opposed to, you never would see that on the All Blacks field, somebody carrying on like that. In New Zealand, we do put more of a premium on the team as opposed to individualism. Tall poppy syndrome is real. I think we need to do a better job in New Zealand of actually helping people stand out a bit more, and particularly in terms of career management, where in the States it is considered to be a positive thing if you have aspiration and you seek mentors and people who can help sponsor you. Whereas in New Zealand, you have to be a bit more careful around that because it's perceived more as posturing.
Yeah. There'll be, after the cricket last night, there'll be quite a few Australians dancing around, I can tell you that now. They love to really shove it up our nose, don't they? And good on them. Why not, I guess. This imposter syndrome, tell me more about that. How do you treat it?
So it really is coming to terms with the fact that you don't have to be all-knowing, all-being, an omnipotent person. And so I work with a number of executives and leaders in organizations and to try to get them to reframe, again, I call it their relationship with vulnerability, and that is, can you let people help you? Can you be okay on a learning curve? Do you send a vibe that other people and their contributions, their perspective are valuable to you? Sometimes if we need to be this perfect person, the vibe that we send off is you're optional. And, that's hard. If you've got a perfectionistic manager who's leading a team, the team often wonders, like, do you need us?
Wow.
Do you need us for anything? And that is, so the essence around imposter syndrome is just step back, be you, be cool on a learning curve. You're learning some things, need people a little bit more. Sometimes when you are behind that mask, it's hard for you to need other people. And yet the essence of connection, and that is, but particularly the essence of trust between two people are typically two people who value and need each other.
Mm-hmm. You talk about the 7 elements of authenticity. What are they?
So I did over 200 interviews for the book, Fitting In, Standing Out, asking people to identify an authentic person in their life. Most people identified someone at work, actually, even though others identified people, in their personal space. And so the 7 elements, one was positivity, and when people talk about a person who they consider to be authentic, they just light up. So you can sort of see the visceral connection there. But an authentic person is typically encouraging, fueling a person, confidence in them. The attribute of genuine or real, a person who's consistent across a number of different forums. Authentic people also have edge. They aren't afraid to stand out, and they aren't afraid to put an exclamation mark behind a particular point every now and then to make a difference. We've talked about vulnerability, and so vulnerability in all the interviews, people talked about that this is a person who is not afraid to be wrong, that type of thing.
That takes a lot of guts for a leader to admit being wrong.
It does. But it makes all the difference in the world, because if you need to be right all the time, 100% of the time, it's just going to be a big disconnect with other people around. Then there's energy, just the sense of, with an authentic person, you really do feel a connection. So it's not like a blocking energy. It's more like a compelling energy that people talk about. The sense of integrity, and that is the integral whole. I felt like for the first 40 years of my life, I didn't have a whole lot of integrity. I was a closeted gay man who was, particularly when I was in the military, and where it was illegal to be gay in the military when I served as an officer. And I just, I didn't feel like I had an integral whole in terms of my, my being, my integrity. And then finally, that sense of connection, and that is authentic people, because of all of those other attributes, actually bring people together.
Yeah, wonderful. Good points. And you make it sound so sensible and logical, and yet so many businesses possibly aspire to do what you're talking about here, but do it so badly. How can people get in touch with you if they'd like to interject some Harold Hillman into their business?
I'm at www.sigmoidcurve.com.
We are celebrating World Social Media Day, so it's quite appropriate. Thank you, Harold.
Thank you, Roman.
Harold Hillman with us here every Sunday on the Sunday Cafe. Always a pleasure to catch up. Always feel like I get a bit of an education with you, Harold. Thank you.
Same here.